DBIR just proved it. Welcome to the exploitation era. 2 years ago, I wrote that the DBIR was entering the vulnerability era. The 2025 report showed exploitation surging as an initial attack vector, closing the gap on credential-based attacks. I said the structural shift was underway. The 2026 DBIR does not just confirm that thesis, it blows past it. Vulnerability exploitation is now the #1 initial access vector in confirmed breaches. Not credentials, not phishing, exploitation. And the gap is widening, not narrowing. This is the largest data set in the report's 19-year history. 22,624 confirmed breaches across 31,860 security incidents. And the story it tells is the same one we've been tracking across every video on this channel. The Vulnapocalypse is not a forecast. It is a current operating reality. Today I want to break down the numbers, why this is happening structurally, and what it means when you connect it to the AI capability curve, the MVD collapse, and the attack surface exponential. The headline number deserves emphasis. Exploitation of vulnerabilities now accounts for 31% of initial access vectors and breaches, up from 20% last year, a 55% increase. It nearly doubles the share held by phishing at 16%. Credential abuse, which used to dominate this chart, has fallen steeply from 22% to 13%. That is a complete inversion of the hierarchy that dominated DBIR for over a decade. This is not a marginal shift. The DBIR shows exploitation share growing year over year while credential-based initial access drops. And the structural reason is straightforward. The attack surface has expanded faster than any organization's ability to defend it. As I laid out in the attack surface exponential, the combination of cloud-native architectures, third-party dependencies, and sprawling SaaS footprints means that there are simply more vulnerable entry points than any security team can monitor, let alone patch. The DBIR's data backs this up directly. Third-party involvement in breaches surged to 48%, a 60% year-over-year increase, driven in large part by exploitation of vulnerabilities in vendor software and edge infrastructure. In several of that year's high-profile campaigns, attackers compromised more than one third-party provider at the same time. When your perimeter is someone else's code, your patch timeline is someone else's priority. Only 26% of critical CISA KEV vulnerabilities were fully remediated by the organizations in 2025, a considerable drop from 38% the year prior. Unremediated category rose to 16%, up from 12%. The median time to full resolution climbed to 43 days, almost 2 weeks more than the previous year's 32 days. And the median number of KEV vulnerabilities organizations had to patch rose from 11 in 2024 to 16 in 2025, almost 50% more critical vulnerabilities to address with remediation capacity that's now scaling to match. Now contrast that 43-day remediation timeline with the attacker's clock. Sergey Epps' zero-day clock research found that the median time to exploit collapsed from 771 days in 2018 to roughly 4 hours in 2024. Moloch demonstrated autonomous exploitation of 174 out of 178 CISA KEVs in an average of 21 minutes per vulnerability with no human intervention. Defenders are measuring their response in weeks and months. Attackers are measuring theirs in minutes and hours. That mismatch is the single most important dynamic in cybersecurity right now. And the DBIR's data on exploitation and the leading initial access vector is the downstream consequence playing out at scale. The vulnerability data infrastructure industry depends on itself as in a crisis. As I covered in the MVD video, NIST reclassified approximately 29,000 backlog CVEs to quote-unquote not scheduled, effectively acknowledging it can't keep pace. First is forecasting 59,000 CVEs this year, with upside scenarios approaching 100,000. The MVD was designed for an era when the vulnerability discovery was measured in thousands per year. At nearly 60,000 and climbing, the system has hit a structural scaling limit. This matters directly for the DBIR's findings because the entire vulnerability management lifecycle, discovery, prioritization, remediation, depends on accurate, timely enrichment data. When the MVD cannot provide CVSS scores or CPE mappings within any reasonable time frame, organizations are flying blind on which vulnerabilities actually affect their environment. The DBIR survival analysis makes that scope of the problem visceral. At day 28, 35% of KEV vulnerability instances were still open, up from 27% in the year prior. That 35% translates to 184 million open vulnerability instances across the dataset, and 47 million vulnerability instances based on the curve trajectory are simply not being addressed anytime soon. The result is predictable. Teams are drowning in vulnerability backlogs they cannot meaningfully prioritize, while attackers exploit that specific vulnerabilities that matter most. Ransomware was present in 48% of all breaches in the 2026 DBIR, up from 44% in the year prior. For small and mid-sized businesses, that number is 88%. That's not a typo. Nearly 9 out of 10 breaches affecting SMBs involved ransomware. The economics explain why. The median ransom payment declined to $100 139,000, down from 150,000, driven partly by the fact that 69% of victim organizations chose not to pay, up from 51% in 2022. But ransomware operators have adapted by shifting the volume over margin, targeting smaller organizations that lack security infrastructure and staffing to prevent or recover from an attack, often below the cybersecurity poverty line. The DBIR has also surfaced a troubling pipeline between infostealers and ransomware. Roughly 50% of ransomware victims had credentials leaked, appearing in infostealer logs within 95 days before the breach. The credential harvesting and the exploitation are not separate problems. They are connected stages of the same industrialized kill chain. This industrialization also shows up in the tooling data. Attackers' use of remote monitoring and management tools increased 240%, a signal that threat actors are leveraging legitimate administration tools to blend into normal network activity and avoid detection. The line between legitimate IT operations and active compromise is blurring. The 2026 DBIR introduces data on generative AI usage by threat actors, and the findings track what I've been covering in the AI capability curve video. The median threat actor used AI assistance across 15 different documented techniques, with some actors leveraging 40 to 50. Gen AI generated content appearing in phishing emails at a growing rate, with synthetic text enabling more convincing and scalable social engineering. But the bigger story is what the DBIR does not yet capture. The report documents Gen AI in phishing and reconnaissance. It does not yet fully quantify AI-accelerated vulnerability discovery and autonomous exploitation. The capabilities demonstrated by Mythos, GPT 5.5, IOL, MOAC, and others, when those capabilities show up in next year's breach data, and they will, the exploitation share that is already leading every other initial access vector is going to accelerate further. The DBIR also found that 45% of employees are now regular users of AI tools on their corporate devices, up from 15% the previous year. Shadow AI is now the third most common non-malicious insider action detected in the DLP dataset, a fourfold increase from the prior year. The most common data type submitted to unauthorized Gen AI services was source code at 28%. The security implications are twofold. Organizations cannot maintain visibility into how AI tools are being used, and the data flowing into unsanctioned AI services represents an expanding exfiltration risk. Here's where the analysis gets uncomfortable. Despite 22,624 confirmed breaches in a single year, despite exploitation as the leading attack vector, despite ransomware hitting 88% of SMB breaches, the overwhelming majority of breach organizations are still in business. Stock prices may drop 5.3% post-breach, but tend to recover and even climb higher within 46 days. Revenue continues, customers stay. This creates a perverse incentive structure that sits at the heart of why vulnerability management remains chronically unfunded or underfunded, and why exploitation keeps climbing. If breaches do not destroy companies, the economic pressure to invest in prevention is weak. Boards make rational capital allocation decisions based on observed consequences, and the observed consequences of most breaches are manageable. This is a point Kelly Shortridge has made in her work, as well as Adrian Sanabria in his destroyedbybreach.com. It continues to document this. The problem with this calculus is that it is backward-looking. It assumes future breaches will carry the same consequences as past ones. Even as exploitation timelines collapse, autonomous attack tools proliferate, and the regulatory landscape evolves, and we are currently in a deregulatory environment at the federal level in the US, which means software liability is likely tabled for now, so vendors do not feel the pressure to address technical debt they ship downstream to consumers and society. This is why many consider cybersecurity to be a market failure. The structural forces driving exploitation to the top of the DBIR are not temporary. They are compounding. The attack surface continues to expand. The MVD cannot keep pace. Autonomous exploitation tools are lowering the skill barrier and collapsing time to exploit to hours. And the economic incentives to invest in vulnerability management remain structurally weak because breaches have not yet become existential events. Yet. This is the exploitation era, not because a single report declared it, but because every structural trend in the data points in the same direction. More vulnerabilities, faster exploitation, slower remediation, expanding attack surfaces, and insufficient consequences to force a different outcome. If you want the full context, watch the AI capability curve video, the MVD video, the Vulnapocalypse video, and the attack surface exponential video. I will link my full article, the DBI report, and my 2024 piece predicting this shift in the description. Everything connects. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.